All right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to the 7th Ask and Tell with MSLs webinar. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Mark Bernaducci. I heard Mark speak on a webinar session held by the Industry Pharmacists Organization actually a few months ago, and his breadth of experience really just made me want to invite him to share his insight with you all. So just a little bit of background about Mark and his experiences before we get started. Dr. Marc Bernarducci received his BS in pharmacy from the University of Rhode Island and immediately after completed an MBA at the University of New Hampshire. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring him on, and I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit more about that. He then returned to URI to pursue a Pharmd specializing in advanced applied clinical pharmacy. Since then, Mark has held many different roles spanning retail pharmacy, medical and scientific affairs, and clinical consulting. Today, Mark will share about the path he took to his first MSL position and will describe some of the other field medical experiences he has had that have helped build the foundation for his success in the pharmaceutical industry. He's happy to touch on topics such as leveraging an uncommon career path, being an MSL before and after the PhRMA guidelines were promulgated, and life as an MSL in general. So as you all know, upon registration, we collected several questions that fall under a few categories, such as preparing for the role, job search and interviewing, things specific to pharmacists and Pharmd MSLs, and then several other more general questions. So we're going to have Mark give us a brief introduction if he has anything else to say, and then we can jump right into those questions. If anybody has questions that aren't answered, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can try to address those later on if we have time, but we will try to be respectful of Mark's time as much as we can. So with that, Mark, do you have anything to add before we get started?
I don't. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Raise your hand.
On my end.
Okay, good. All right, fantastic. So thanks for that eloquent introduction. I have nothing to add. I think you covered all the bases there. So thank you, Renee and Lindsay, for pulling this together. The IPHO presentation that I did earlier this year was the first, it wasn't the first webinar or anything or virtual presentation I've ever done, but it was certainly of the nature, its nature, which was sharing my experiences and helping people like you who are participating or who have registered or looking to break into the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in medical affairs. And so that has kind of snowballed into a series of speaking engagements. Some of you have listened to my podcast already that was done 2 days ago. So that got posted today. So in terms of my unconventional career path, I will defer you to that. I was introduced to you all as a speaker. Perhaps the better term is today's guest answerer. So I'm happy to be doing speaking as far as it relates to answering your questions. I don't have a formal presentation, although I do have some visual aids on standby if I think it will help in illustrating my points that I'm trying to make. So with that said, I'm all ears. No question, as they always say. The only question that's a bad question is the one not asked. So in the time that we have until 5 o'clock this afternoon, I am ready to answer any and all questions that I can.
All right, thanks, Mark. And just so everyone knows, in case you're not familiar with the podcast he mentioned, it's called MSL Talk. It's by Tom Caravella and the Carolan Group. They're an MSL recruiting agency, and it's a really great resource. Aside from what you hear today, I encourage everyone to go check that out and look at all the previous episodes as well.
It's shameless self-promotion there, but it is informative, I have to say, in terms of
it really is,
career path. So.
All right, so welcome everyone. I'll start off by asking some questions under the category preparing for the role. So some of you submitted things along the lines of MBA and how that kind of sets Mark apart from other people. So the first question is, how has an MBA degree helped you excel as a field medical professional? And more specifically, are there any specific business courses you recommend taking?
Okay, so early on in my academic trajectory, I was going to school full time. I went to school at a time when the minimum duration for earning your Bachelor of Science in pharmacy, and you could use your Bachelor of Science of Pharmacy to sit for your boards, was 5 years. So I didn't go, I'm not part of the 6-year Pharmd generation, if you will. And so I made the decision very early on during probably in my 4th year of pharmacy school, so which would be the equivalent now of, I think, P3 or something like that. I don't know the conversion, if you will. But I made the decision very early on to complement all the scientific training that I received as an undergraduate in pharmacy with some business acumen, because it was very clear to me the 2 main career paths that people took at that time after they earned their bachelor's were basically hospital or retail. And there was a very small percentage, even at that time, who were going into pharmaceutical sales. Because at the time, Lilly was well known for only hiring pharmacists, licensed pharmacists, as their sales representatives, not medical affairs, but sales. So, but that group was kind of an exception. The 2 main pots were retail pharmacy practice and hospital. And even with all the scientific training, you knew very much that the cost of care delivery and the cost of drug inventory and operational efficiency, et cetera, those types of things definitely worked their way into the discussion, although they weren't the focus. And I wanted to learn more about that. So I made the decision early on, as soon as I graduated from a Bachelor of Science degree, I was going to go get an MBA. I didn't really consider things like Masters in Health Administration or Masters in Public Health, MPH, or I think there's an MPA, a Masters in Public Affairs, which has a health slant. But certainly MHA, MPH, I didn't consider those other degrees. MBA was already on my mind. And now that we have this social platform called LinkedIn, I see a lot more MHAs, a lot more MPHs out there. So I can't speak a lot to the curriculum of either one of those, but I certainly can speak to how the MBA helped. So with that said, I even went on to get my Pharmd after my MBA, but how the MBA helps me in the pharmaceutical industry is, even though you're in medical affairs and you're in a non-promotional role, you have to understand that pharmaceutical companies are a commercial organization in a capitalist society. So they are looking, as much good as they do in goodwill and unrestricted funding of research, et cetera. The industry is coming under fire now, it seems, with these vaccines, and kind of old debates are being rustled back to the surface about how the industry is only out for money. That's why they rush the vaccines out. Listen through that noise and help, for those that you encounter that espouse that. And if you know anything about the pharmaceutical industry, try to help put that in perspective for them. But the industry does a lot of good, and it's a for-profit industry, okay? So I wanted to understand the financial implications of what we did and what we do in terms of education. How does that help drive product growth? And so having in life cycle management, you have a product in research, pre-launch stage, you have it in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever it may be. Now you're in mid-phase 3, mid to late phase 3, you're thinking pre-launch. What do you need to do pre-launch? What is the competition doing? How is that going to impact your launch? These are the things that aren't taught in pharmacy school. So these are the things that you either come in with some sort of sensitivity towards, you come into the industry with some sort of understanding or sensitivity towards, or you're going to be drinking out of a fire hose, because as much science as there is in the pharmaceutical industry, there's just as much business and business planning. And every single company that I've been a part of, whether they be small, large, or anything in between, have been commercially driven. Yes, there's an R&D component, and that's a necessary component. And we have the people who can speak to that science, the medical affairs people. But the overarching mantra is, this is a commercial organization. We're looking to launch a product for profit, but also for the good of patients. But profits fund additional research and additional accommodations of unmet need in the future. So kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think a good one. But you know, there can be some debate of what's an acceptable profit, what is not. But you know, having that business acumen really helped me understand some of the business decisions and helped me kind of establish credibility, actually, cross-functionally. And that's perhaps the most, if I'm talking freely here, that is perhaps the most valuable aspect of having those multiple disciplines. So the clinical with the pharmacy and the business, is that I was able to quickly establish and have a sensitivity. If I'm talking to somebody who's a director or VP of sales, and I'm talking in their language, dollars and cents, but I'm not forgetting my core role, which is education and research, but I'm relating it to how it relates to the flow of money within the organization, I establish a lot of credibility that way. And I have to tell you, you know, be very transparent, you know, a lot of these companies have well-established medical affairs departments, but if I had a nickel for every time that somebody on the commercial side of the organization asked me, well, what is it that you guys do anyway? You know, these functions have been there for decades, yet somehow there's not always a broad appreciation for what medical affairs does. And there are a lot of nuances to that. But certainly having the business degree helped prepare me for that and help me talk on both sides of the table.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. For some reason, I never really considered having the business background going into MSL, but it makes a lot of sense.
I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm not saying it's necessary just because of the context of this presentation. I'm not saying you have to get it, but it did help me.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so in the same vein of preparing for the role, another question that our audience had was, what do hiring managers want to see in terms of background training for PhDs compared to MDs and PharmDs?
So hiring, that's a good question, although I could go in a lot of different directions with that, because I'm stepping back from that question and I'm saying, okay, somebody with primarily research background, not really a clinical background, looking to break into industry, maybe even academic background, looking to break into industry. It depends on the organization and where they are at with a particular product or what their needs are. And I know that may sound like a cop-out. I'm going to answer this the best I can. If an organization is in pre-launch, say they're in phase 1 or phase 2, or even getting ready to launch a phase 3 program for a product, they may want people who have strong research acumen and who may have participated in the research or done site evaluations or things of that nature, and developing relationships with other, for lack of a better term, hardcore researchers. So in that instance, you're matching the background with the company and where they are with the need. Then there are hiring managers who are representing an opportunity that is more commercially driven. And so depending on your PhD background or your academic or research background, what commercial background can you bring to this role? Because at a launch and a post-launch, it's very commercially driven. You can do all the teaching and everything, but you have to understand the underlying, you know, you can do the education and the slide presentations, et cetera. And we'll get to this later, I'm sure, about the art of being an MSL, but it's hard to say, you know, advise somebody who's maybe a PhD now or in academia or a research role now exactly what you need to do to prepare yourself for industry. It'll depend on the opportunity that is before you and that you're considering, and whether it's more research focused, given that time at the life cycle management of that product. But having said that, anything that you can do, if you're in a research role, an education role now, anything that you can do to get public speaking opportunities, show on your resume that you've done a lot of public speaking, that can be achieved certainly very easily in the academic setting, but in the research setting, maybe you don't have all those opportunities, maybe you do. If you've gone to congresses, make sure you have highlighted your presentations at scientific congresses of posters or research that you've done. I would also try to focus on network management, show that you're able to network and influence your peers, even though you may not have direct authority over them, they don't report to you, but you're able to influence them. Maybe you're part of a special interest scientific group and you're leading that group, and it's really a group of people or researchers with all the same interests, and you're taking the initiative there, showing that. That'll help you in terms of people management, people influence, because hiring managers will look for that. How would you fit into a team environment? Some researchers and some academicians may be better off left alone and doing their own thing, while others have more of a team or a collaborative dynamic. So highlighting that would help you. I know some of these answers are long-winded, but I feel I need to put some background to it and backdrop to it. So.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. And I mean, as much advice as you have is definitely going to touch at least one person in this audience. So I think it's good to share everything that you have. So you mentioned presentation experience and public speaking and things along those lines. So our next question is leads us into the clinical paper presentation portion of some interviews is something that we've heard of. And somebody asks, what is your best advice how to prepare for the clinical paper presentation portion of the interview, and have you had those experiences personally?
Yeah, so I think I would say probably 85% of the time for any job for which I've interviewed, I've had to do a presentation. It takes on several forms, or really a couple. They either ask you, pick a topic that you want to present on, or we are going to assign you a topic or a paper to present on. So on the topics, and I've done a lot of presentations over my career. So there are a lot of topics I can sit and present on. They usually give you a time limit. They usually let you know who's going to be attending. So you'll want to understand, you want to know who they are, and you want to understand their role in the company, because they'll be looking at your presentation through a different lens, perhaps, than maybe your hiring manager was. So, if someone from regulatory or compliance is listening to your presentation, they may be listening for how you make statements, that you don't make any false claims, or you don't mislead your audience based on the data that you're presenting. Whereas if you present, if someone from a commercial side of the organization, they want to hear your personality. The commercial side is usually very energetic, very outgoing, gregarious people. So they don't necessarily want to hear like monotone show up and throw up kind of thing where you're just reading right off the slide. They want to see how well you engage your audience. And that's a bit of a challenge these days, even with this virtual format, right? Whereas if you're standing at the way I used to do it, and lately I've been doing it the virtual format, but most of the time I've done it, I've flown somewhere, I'm standing up, I'm using the technology at my disposal or their disposal, and talking live, and I'm reading body language. 97% of communication is nonverbal. So I can see all your faces and your pictures if your video isn't on, but I can't read body language. So it's a little bit more challenging in the virtual. So, we've all had to learn how to adjust, even the interviewers who use the virtual platform for the interview. Stay within the time limit. Also, time yourself. Make sure you rehearse, that you've got your timings down, that you got your transition and thought down, slide transitioning from one idea. Whenever I make a presentation, I always think that I'm telling a story to somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about. So even though the audience are all people that are assigned to the product or the disease state, therapeutic area that you're presenting about, and you're doing an assigned presentation, assume they don't know anything, because that's what they're assuming. They're assuming that you're going to go in front of a KOL who doesn't know all the specifics about the particular product, and you're going to walk them down a very, rational, methodical story, telling a story about the product. So think of develop your storytelling abilities, and that underpin good slide content generation. Don't make your slides too busy. More content isn't great content. You can do more with putting tidbits on slides and then speaking to the content than trying to jam all the content right on the slide. And that's a bit of an art too. It's taken me decades to get to where I'm very comfortable putting together slides and using, animations and transitions and stuff in an impactful way, not a comical way, but in a way in which it leaves a lasting impact with the audience. So, and of course, much of these same principles can apply when you're presenting on a topic of your choice. I wouldn't necessarily just take the presentation that you've done maybe 5 years ago and say, this is going to work for my audience. Again, make sure you understand your audience, even though you know the topic cold and your audience in this case may not. Look at your slides and make sure that the content of each slides and the idea and the story you're trying to tell to the given audience is appropriate. So.
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice for these interview presentations. So going along with that, some people asked, for those of us getting stuck in the screening round, what advice can you give for getting past round 2?
Well, it's the medical affairs opportunities out there are more and more abundant than they ever have been back when I started, which seems like when Jesus Christ walked the earth. But and Moses was at homecoming, but it's been a long time, to say the least. So a lot of things have changed. So while the medical affairs opportunities are more abundant, the competition is there because there are more and more people like all of you on this presentation who have registered for it, may not be able to present. You're all interested in breaking into industry, and that has caused an explosion of the demand for these positions. And I think that the demand is exceeding the supply. It's an ebb and flow. So sometimes there are a lot of positions available, and the talent pool really isn't out there, and then all of a sudden the talent pool. So where I think we are now is a talent pool is very abundant. And while there are more abundant opportunities in medical affairs for people like yourselves, they're not enough for a one-to-one matchup. So it becomes very competitive. And so just think that, every HR department, every hiring manager is getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applications for one type of opportunity in their company. So they use their own algorithms, they use search words, they have, I'll call it AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know if it's that sophisticated, but they do have electronic ways of screening, looking for keywords in your resume to help bring your resume to the top or help kick it out to a secondary or tertiary pile. So I know that doesn't tell you necessarily directly how to get past that initial screening round. But, if you're talking about that initial phone screen, or that initial video screen these days, you want to make sure you dress appropriately. Don't dress casually like you're at home, like most of us do. As you see, I'm fully dressed, by the way, full transparency. I'm dressed in a nice shirt. I know this is a very casual, conversational platform, this opportunity, but I'm dressing as if I were sitting amongst, professional colleagues. And for those of you that may not be dressed in a button-down shirt or whatnot, that's fine for here. But, don't be underdressed for your video interview, for sure. And certainly don't be underdressed for one in person. So dress as if it's, it's your initial phone screen, but dress as if it's your final interview. Maybe a tie is not necessary, but certainly a collared shirt and a jacket, or nice blouse for women, or even a professional jacket over the blouse. So, you know, dress like this opportunity is very important to you. So I'm not saying that that might be the buzzkill for getting beyond any initial screening, but that's one way to make a good nonverbal impression. Dress for the role. And then it comes down to, you know, your personality over the video interview, your personality over the phone. Not everyone has a phone personality. Some people work better through video. Some people are better over the phone because they know people can't see them or what have you. I mean, there are some people that don't have their video turned on because maybe they have, they're just more comfortable not being seen. That's not a criticism, but you know, keep in mind there are hundreds of people going through these phone screens, and anything that you can do to set yourself apart from the other masses, I would advise you to do. You know, and if you listen to my podcast there, feedback there. Okay. If you listen to my podcast, one of the last bits of information is don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone. So, you know, you might have to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit to, you know, get ahead. So if interviews or video interviews don't make you feel comfortable, do whatever it takes, you know, have a mentor, team up with a mentor who's done a lot of video interviews, and get comfortable. This is kind of the new normal in a sense. I don't see it going away anytime soon. So, and then proper follow-up techniques, you know, I guess I'll use the term ghost. If a recruiter ghosts you or a hiring manager ghosts you, if a hiring manager ghosts you, usually hiring managers will defer to a recruiter. But if you're dealing directly with the hiring manager, I would follow up once, you know, and I would follow up no sooner than maybe a week to 10 days after not hearing anything and saying, hey, look, reiterate your interest in the role. And it's a fair question. Where does my candidacy stand right now for this opportunity? Just keep it short and sweet. With a recruiter, good recruiters won't ghost you. Good recruiters will close the loop. And even good hiring, you know, I'm not saying hiring managers aren't good if they don't close the loop, but they're so inundated, just like recruiters. But I find that recruiters are a little more responsive, a little bit better at closing the loop. Not all of them do either. But with a recruiter, it's kind of like 3 strikes, you're out. For me, I follow up once. If I don't hear a recruiter, I follow up a 3rd time. And these are 7 to 10 day increments. And I follow up the 3rd time. And then if I don't hear from that person, I never follow up again. So, and I just move on with my other, you know, job opportunities. And that's the other thing. Don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. You may be well steeped in neurodegenerative diseases or neurology, or you may be infectious disease, or you may be cardiology, and you're applying to only cardiology roles. You know, a lot of the skills that you've acquired in your respective work environments can be transferable. And not all companies look for somebody with just, you know, they prefer it, but they don't always get to find it. So don't be afraid to throw your hat in the ring. If you have a lot of neurology experience, throw your hat in the ring in immunology or cardiology. Don't be reckless and say, you know, apply for a VP position. You have absolutely no pedigree or credentials that would even support that. But be thoughtful, but, you know, take some chances and you might be pleasantly surprised. So have a few irons in the fire. So if one fizzles out, you've got 2 others or more to work on.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice. And definitely we could tell just from the questions that were being submitted that many people are frustrated in the interview phase, but I understand it's a quite lengthy process, and definitely not limiting yourself probably helps.
My other tidbit from the podcast was be patient. It is a lengthy process. Some companies say, oh, we want to move right away. And their idea of moving right away is 3 months.
Right.
not a month
next
or
week.
3 weeks. Trust me. So.
Yeah. So one of the questions actually submitted was, and you sort of just touched on this, how important is it to look for positions in the same therapeutic area as your background or training? So since you just touched on that a little bit, maybe we can take a little spin on that question. Have you ever applied for something that was completely outside of your comfort zone, and how'd that go?
If you looked at my LinkedIn profile, and I think a lot of you have already, I have a very unconventional professional trajectory, and each time I've changed roles in medical affairs, at least field-based medical roles, I have taken on a different therapeutic area because I enjoy that challenge, and I enjoy, it depends, you have to do a self-inventory. Is that really the right thing for you to do? It was for me, albeit it requires a lot of explanation to a hiring manager because hiring managers aren't used to seeing a professional trajectory that I have had. So, you know, as you related in your introduction of me, is that, you know, I've been in retail pharmacy, I've been in field-based medical, I've been on the vendor side of the business, I've done national speaking gigs, you know, and I've been in a variety of therapeutic areas and in consulting for myself as a 1099 independent contractor. So what I gained from all of that is the adaptability and the versatility. And that's what I always emphasize to a hiring manager or anyone looking at my resume and kind of wrinkling their brow and saying, I was like, I know where you're going with this. As like, this should communicate versatility and adaptability to you. And believe me, in field-based medical, you're going to need both those skill sets. Now, that relates to, I said, you know, if you have neurology experience or infectious disease, I think it's important to diversify a little bit, primarily because it's so competitive. Now, hiring managers are, the ideal candidate is going to be somebody, these days, is going to be somebody who has breaking into the role, I have to say, breaking into their first field-based medical role. Is going to be somebody who has a lot of research or scientific experience in the therapeutic area of need, can bring a lot of contacts in that therapeutic area to the table right from day one. So it's all about networking, okay, and leveraging those networks. But there are some companies that, you know, that's their ideal candidate, and then have the next ideal is have great presentation skills, communication skills, just like, you know, the god or goddess of field-based medical. That's what that's their wish list. They don't always get that, you know, and they realize that, you know, they can shoot, what is it? Shoot for the star, shoot for the moon and land on a star, right? So they're shooting for the moon with this ideal list, and the recruiters will tell you that too. And you may land on a star, and that star may be, you know, a person who doesn't have all the training and everything in that therapeutic area, but you connected with the interviewers. That's very important, and that's even more of a challenge these days with virtual interviewing. You connected with them, they got a good feel for your background, whatever it might be, even though it's not in the therapeutic area. Because let me tell you, especially the moderate to larger size companies, if you don't know the product or the therapeutic area, trust me, if you come on board, it will be shoved down your throat, and you will have to be certified and everything. So they'll make sure you know the therapeutic area. So if they sense that your drive and aptitude is there, and your willingness to learn and collaborate with different functions is there, you will have options in other therapeutic areas. So, you know, I just wouldn't pigeonhole yourself. I know somebody who, not too long ago, he recently retired actually, and he spent 26 years in respiratory. And I thought that was amazing. Because compared to me, I spend a couple, 2 or 3 years here in one therapeutic area, another year here in another. And he said, I would never want to go out of respiratory. That's all he knew was respiratory. So when you're job seeking in a competitive environment, if all you know is respiratory, you're already limiting your chances right then and there. You're already limiting yourself to one slice of that MSL pie. There are so many other areas, rare disease, you know, I've already mentioned infectious disease, cardiology, rheumatology, immunology, you name it. So it would behoove you to become comfortable with, your skill sets and recognize your, what do I want to say, your liabilities, i.e. you might not, you might be well steeped in cardiology, but you're applying for a neurology role or a dermatology, but have enough confidence in your other abilities that might, other strengths that would overshadow in a positive way your liabilities. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
I'm no script here, so I'm just going and going and going, and I'll go as long as I can.
Yeah, no, I think this has been very informative so far. So another question that people have regarding MSLs and the interactions that they have with different departments, do you have any suggestions for specific resources that people can use to learn about how MSLs interact with other departments or other teams within the company?
So what we call we call this cross-functional collaboration. Might go by other names, but I like cross-functional collaboration. That is, there are really no resources. I mean, I'm pausing for thought here. So you might try a couple of organizations. I'm sure all of you on this call know Medical Affairs Professional Society, MAPS, or ACMA, the Accreditation Committee for Medical Affairs or something, Academy. I forget the acronym, but those are two organizations that may have resources on their website or available to you. Reach out to them about cross-functional collaboration. Maybe I'll break up the monotony of my own face with a little visual aid. Let me see. Hopefully you can all see this. Not much of it. There we go. Talking about cross-functional collaboration. This is not an all-inclusive list. Hopefully you can all see this. Of the different areas and functions within medical affairs that you can collaborate with. And also you're collaborating with commercial outside of medical affairs as well. Each company is different. Each company has their own compliance policies that govern how internal and external communications should be formed and disseminated from medical affairs to other non-medical affairs functions. So there's really no manual because each company is really different. I can tell you this. There are settings where you can only respond reactively, and there are settings when you can be proactive in your information dissemination. Those are the two big buckets that medical affairs is constantly confronted with whenever they're engaging in real time somebody live, or they get an email request or verbal request from MedInfo, let's say, or through MedInfo. Is this a request that medical affairs can answer? First of all, it has to be qualified. Is this reactive or is this proactive? And then if it's reactive, you answer the question. If it's proactive, it definitely has to stay on label. Even though you're medical affairs and you're permitted to go off label in certain circumstances, usually in those reactive ones, you have to know what lane to stay in and in what circumstance. So I believe the MAPS or ACMA may have some training on that, reactive, proactive communication in medical affairs. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but I would search out those two organizations and inquire within to see what they might have to offer as far as that.
Yeah, that's good advice. It looks like some people are already typing out the full names of those societies and organizations in the chat, so that is helpful.
Thank you. I'm not seeing that chat, so.
No worries. So our next set of questions.
I'll go back to my face eventually.
Okay, you're welcome to stay on your slides if you'd like.
Yeah, I can stay on this slide. Here's kind of a, cross-functional. It's highly regulated. It's it's more regular. You know, I started before the pharma guidelines. It started in field-based medical before the pharma guidelines were promulgated in 2001. So I've seen what it was like before. It was like the Wild West. You couldn't tell a medical affairs professional from a salesperson, to now there's well-defined lanes that we need to stay in. So I'll just let this slide, I'm not going to speak to this slide anymore. I'll just let this sit up here as a visual cue for people.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So our next set of questions were submitted by people with Pharmd backgrounds or are currently in pharmacy training.
Mm-hmm.
The first question was, what can one do during APPE rotations to diversify oneself and to gain experiences related to an MSL, even when not in an industry setting? And there are a few questions about APPE rotations and ways to get specific therapeutic experience. So if you could speak to a little bit about that, that would be
Okay, help me understand what is, you know, this may be an acronym that came up after my time, if you will, but what's APPE?
It's Advanced Pharmacy Practice Experiences.
Okay.
So, and I'm also not a Pharmd background, so I think maybe somebody could clarify in the chat whether these rotations are required or whether this is an elective experience.
Yeah.
Because there were a few questions that were highlighting APP.
So is this, in other words, like residencies and fellowships?
To my knowledge, yes. If someone can take themselves off mute. Okay, we see that APPEs are required. So,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
George, I think you're a little quiet.
Oh, Can you hear?
Okay.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was saying that the APP rotations are required because that's what you do most of your final year. So they are the rotations you do before graduation.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're different from residencies.
Okay, I got it. So what I would call my clerkships or externships and internships back in the day. So the terminology has changed. So if industry offers, now you said even if not in an industry setting, I would look for APPE opportunities that allow you to do public speaking, do a lot of public speaking, a lot of engagement, so networking. I don't know if you have that choice. You say they're required, so I don't know if they're structured in this way. But if you're looking to supplement whatever is required of you in the context of these APPEs, and again, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to the modern pharmacy curriculum. But I would look for, if you have this flexibility, I would look for opportunities that allow you to do a lot of public speaking, allow you to do a lot of networking, and even allow you to do things like journal clubs, where you sit in small groups and discuss scientific information. Industry does a lot of journal clubs internally for its medical affairs personnel to have them keep up on, you know, the science, but also externally, industry does what I'll term generically as regional scientific exchange forums. There are a lot of restrictions when you go outside the walls of your company to do something like this, but it can be pulled off under the right circumstances. So these are basically small group scientific exchanges. So, you know, if you can seek out or look at the description of the opportunities available to you through the APPE program or segment of your training, then I would look for those three things. And then, of course, you know, I didn't mention it because you said not in an industry setting, but if you can start at least communicating, because there are a lot of industry companies that are offering internships, externships, fellowships. You know, I don't know, you know, which companies are offering what, but I know that they're being offered. And I know, in fact, that when I was at Mylan, we had an MSL. This was the first for me. We had an MSL who had not completed her Pharmd. She was an intern the year before, and then just slid right into an MSL role on the respiratory team while she was still completing her Pharmd degree. I don't know how she's doing it, and I think she is a Pharmd now, but I couldn't believe that she was very studious, I have to say. So those opportunities are out there. Internships, I would look for those as well, and if you can do it, if the time demands do not interfere with your required curriculum, so that you make sure that you at least satisfy your academic requirements, I would look to be in one of those positions.
All right, so a follow-up question, a little bit more focused on residency now. Somebody would like to know, how can a resident whose residency is not focused on a particular therapeutic area develop expertise in a therapeutic area? So I think maybe if you have a more general residency, how can you get that?
Well, you could always do another residency in that focused area, or a fellowship in that focused area. Outside of that, let's say you're done, or you're done with the classroom setting and you're ready to start earning money to pay off student loans or whatever your situation may be. Like I said earlier, companies don't always get their dream candidate. So I would start, as it relates to getting therapeutic area expertise and then getting into a role, there are large and small and everything in between companies that will hire people that don't necessarily have all of the experience in the therapeutic area, because they know that they will train you up and you will get that experience through being hired. Now, trying to set yourself apart from an increasingly competitive talent pool, how you get that experience, you might consider doing volunteer work. I know that sounds incredulous after accumulating all sorts of student loans, but maybe you get a job. Again, patience is a virtue here. This can be you have your the next 40 or so years to be working. So it doesn't always mean you have to, I admire the determination and the drive to, say, this is what I want to be doing. But it may not always come to you right away. So you may have to pay your dues a little longer. So volunteer in an anticoagulation clinic, let's say, if you want to get more experience in anticoagulation, thrombosis, and hemostasis, whatever it may be, look for volunteer opportunities. Search for jobs that match up well with your current training and strengths and weaknesses, but don't take your eye off the prize, which is eventually getting into a field-based medical role, because eventually that tenacity and that perseverance will pay off. It's a difficult question to answer because it's so competitive. Sometimes it's the luck of the draw, but a lot can be said too for your personality. During the interview process, if you show adaptability and congeniality and the ability to handle tough questions well, that goes a long way, because as an MSL, you're going to be standing in front of people who are going to be asking you tough questions a lot. And it goes a long way on how you handle those tough questions. Do you handle them professionally? And if you don't know the answer, do you handle that situation professionally as well? Not everyone expects you to know everything all the time. Not even your audiences that you're presenting to, not even the hiring team with whom you're maybe interviewing. So while you may not have therapeutic area experience or focus, try to focus on the things that you do bring to the table. And when you're interviewing with a hiring team or presenting to somebody, make sure those aspects of you shine. Don't go in saying, well, I don't have this, you may not want to listen to me. Say, go in with the attitude, non-verbally, of course, that I have all these qualities. I'm a good presenter. I know this material. I'll be able to answer the questions confidently, and they're going to see how well prepared I am. That makes a very strong statement as well. So hopefully that helps. I don't really have, panacea answers, silver bullet answers for all these questions. So hopefully they're giving you some food for thought.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint exactly what to do to set yourself apart too, since everybody has such different and diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
But then somebody's writing in the chat that it's important to always mention that everyone has transferable skills, so make sure that you're able to highlight those in an interview as well.
Case in point, right here. Oh, you don't see me anymore.
There you go.
Maybe I'll change a slide. Network.
Yeah, network.
Oh, I got the websites here too for the ACMA. You know what? I'll send a slide deck out to everyone. I think, or if you want to do it, Renee, that's fine too, but I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, we usually send a thank you email, so I could attach it there if that works for you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. So switching gears a little bit, this question I see quite a bit on attendee submissions. Quite a few people are asking, in your experience, what are the downsides of being an MSL? And I know this is also quite an individualized question. I'm sure people have different opinions about this, but what do you find is a drawback or a downside?
Okay, so the one real downside, and it's very real, and it's quite personal, that with personal relationships, they tend, whether it be friendships or romantic relationships or otherwise, depending on your territory and what your charge is as an MSL, you're going to be away from home a lot. And you have to be okay with that. And not everyone is. And that can somewhat be a rubbing point, a conflict point with people that you care about, that you're trying to maintain relationships. Now, I know we have mobile technology and everything, we do FaceTime, but there's nothing like being in the presence of another for whatever reason. So that would have to be the downside in terms of the degree or the amount of time that you can potentially spend away from your familiar, comfortable environment, i.e. your home. Now, there was a time in my career where I couldn't get enough adventure, racking up frequent flyer miles and loyalty points and hotel chains and stuff like that I'm still using today. But as I'm at a different stage in my career now, I do enjoy being home a little bit more, especially during the holidays. Normally this time of year, although pandemic aside, let's pretend the pandemic wasn't here. It's not fun to fly during this pandemic, I'll tell you that. And I'm not doing hardly any flying during this pandemic. But, I'd still be going strong right up to the end of the year. Meanwhile, trying to plan for holiday travel and getting gifts for people and stuff. So, when it comes to the holidays, it can be a stressor point with everything that you have to do and get done before the end of the year. So that, that's the main downside. And with all the travel and all the mobile technology that you have at your fingertips, you ought to be able to use it to your advantage. So because it's going to help you manage your time, manage your calendar, and be most efficient while you're scrambling from one destination to another. So that's all I have to say about that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one that comes to mind for me, thinking about being an MSL in the future. I think the travel will probably be the hardest adjustment.
Yeah, especially if you have children too, young children.
Yeah.
Bringing them up, raising them.
Right. All right. So speaking about the different companies that you've worked for, in general, how different have your experiences in medical affairs been from company to company?
The general role that I've had from company to company has always been the same. I mean, comparing apples to apples. So being an individual contributor in one company is largely the same as being an individual contributor in another company. In terms of the role description, what they're expecting of you. Same thing for a field-based leader, which I've been as well. The difference is the culture. Company cultures, it's hard to get, unless you specifically drill down on it during the hiring process. I'm going to go back to my face. All right, sorry to disappoint. Unless you drill down, can you see me? Good? Yes? All right, good. All right, cool. Just, there we go. Sorry about that. So company culture is a harder thing to characterize when you're interviewing. And, you know, I had a fairly recent experience where everything went swimmingly smooth and the interviewing and the onboarding. And then once I got in the role, I was like, what did I get myself into? So, you know, it's the people that you're going to be working with, and sometimes they try to incorporate those people into your interviewing process, which I think is very prudent. So you'll get an idea, excuse me, of the type of people with whom you'll be collaborating. But not always is that the case, and sometimes it's a little bit of a surprise, potluck. There are a lot of politics, no matter where you go. The grass isn't always greener, okay? Whether it be a large company, small company, and anything in between. People are always trying to make a name for themselves, climb the corporate ladder, and they kind of care about number one. And, you know, that can be very toxic. I've been part of a very toxic environment in the past as well. As good intentioned as I was, you know, nothing was ever received well or with those intentions in mind or whatever. Someone always thought that it was a threat to them, you know, so it's hard to predict. And the best thing I can recommend for anyone wanting to break into industry is ask about the culture. You know, companies have their mission statement and their values, what they value on their website. You can learn some stuff from there, but ask the people that are interviewing and listen to how they respond. And, you know, in some cases, if they're responding and they know their peers or their boss is listening, you might not get full transparency. I'm just being very honest because I have no boss here listening to what I have to say right now. So I'm telling you like it is. And sometimes, as much as they would like to give you the transparent picture, they may not be able to. Or they may just say, we know our environment's a crap show, but we don't want to scare this candidate off because we have difficulty retaining our talent. That's a big sign. If you know somebody who's been in a company, if you have, you know, I wouldn't necessarily go ask blindly, but if you know somebody that just recently left the company that you're interested in joining, you know, ask them about what's the turnover, what's the culture like. They'll give you probably a more transparent answer than a hiring team. So that's my advice there.
Yeah, I think getting a candid answer from somebody who's filter-free is really important, yeah, especially when making decisions from company to company.
And you have to understand why that is. And it's not always a bad thing. It's just a reality of it. So you just have to be creative and working around that.
Definitely. So one of our final questions, somebody was wondering, where would you like to go from here? And I'm wondering the same thing just by looking at your diverse set of experiences and all the different roles that you've held. Are there any positions that you could see yourself enjoying that you haven't yet experienced?
Absolutely. Building a team from complete scratch, from the ground up, a medical affairs team. And I'm working on an opportunity such as that right now in imaging. So I've been on the imaging side of the business for a little while. So I've not only done therapeutics, but I've also done imaging. Imaging is a different sector than therapeutics are. So that's where I see my broad array of skills and abilities being best applied. Because I've proven myself in the individual contributor and the field-based leadership role, coming in already into a well-established organization hierarchy, backfilling a leadership role. I've never had the opportunity to say, all right, this is how I'd like to structure this medical affairs department, and here are the functions I want to build out first, et cetera. So I would love for that opportunity to present itself. And it did. Still some work to do there, but it may come to fruition, it may not. However, I will say something. This is another public service announcement. I'm going to go back to my slides. Hopefully you can all see the slides here. That should be sharing on that network slide. Now, we're amidst this pandemic and we have vaccines. Oh, don't forget International MSL Day, March 27, 2021. All right, so, but the Medical Reserve Corps, this is the slide I wanted to show. So what I've undertaken recently, because I have the desire and the ability to do so, is volunteer my time. And there have been times in my career where there have been, gaps, time gaps in my employment. People asking, what are you doing now? If you're not gainfully employed or what have you, what are you doing now? One of the best things that you can do is volunteer. I mentioned it earlier to help you get that experience that you're looking for. But at a time like this, we're rolling out, these are unprecedented times. We're rolling out the first of perhaps many COVID vaccines, or at least a second one coming out in another week. And we have a definite need to get our frontline and our vulnerable populations vaccinated initially. So I decided to volunteer, being a licensed pharmacist, even though I haven't practiced pharmacy in some time. I keep my license active and I'm able to do things like this. So I volunteered for a vaccination task force locally here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I will be helping administer these vaccines when it rolls out next week in our area. So, consider Medical Reserve Corps, and that gives you experience in vaccinations, and it also looks great on a resume. I'm not doing this necessarily for my resume. I'm definitely committed to this, and there's a public health need, and I have the ability to help fulfill that. So besides starting, building a team from scratch for a small imaging company, hopefully that comes to fruition, volunteering my time for certainly a worthy cause.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So we have a final question that we like to ask everybody.
Okay.
What is one thing that you wish you had known or done differently before becoming an MSL? Now, this could be anything from your training from 20 years ago or something more recent. Just one piece of advice that you could give aspiring MSLs.
That I would have done differently.
Yes, or that you wish you would have known.
I wish I would have known how unpredictable. So earlier on, clearly I know this now, but earlier on in my career, I had this idea, as long as I did good work, I'd be employed forever, as long as I met or exceeded expectations. And I learned pretty early on, after my first MSL role, that there are forces beyond your control, and your boss has to lay you off, or the company is going through a massive reorganization. No matter what good work you did, you didn't see it coming, and all of a sudden you're thrust into unemployment. So always having a plan B and planning for that, that unexpected circumstance where you've been brought on this real first-in-class product and late stage phase 3, and then all of a sudden, boom, it doesn't meet its primary clinical endpoint. And all the people that they hired on to support the launch of the product are now, displaced. And you never saw it coming. Everything was going great. And then one fateful day. So, these things happen, and these surprises have happened more than once in my career. Not always have I had the plan B that I have now in place. So when you're starting in your careers, certainly in field-based medical, nothing is guaranteed. That's why you saw the earlier slide that I had up there. How well you adapt is going to be the measure of your success. Not how much you know, how much you make, or how much what kind of car you drive, or how many things you have. It's how well you adapt, because life, personally and professionally, are going to throw you curveballs you never saw coming. So you just have to be able to pick yourself up, have a plan, and move forward from there. So.
Definitely. I think 2020 has given everyone a taste of life throwing us a curveball.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but we're all dealing with it.
Yeah.
So that actually concludes the list of pre-submitted questions from attendees. But if you have a few minutes, we could either have people unmute themselves and ask some questions, or type them into the chat and we can try to have those answered for you.
Yeah, I just checked my watch. We have plenty of time for additional questions if we need. And I'm not insulted if there are none, so don't feel obligated, but if you have any that come to mind.
We have a couple of thank yous coming through. Thank you so much for all of your invaluable insight.
Pleasure is mine. Maybe this is the... Hopefully you see that. That's the most important slide.
There you go. Your Bitmoji is very accurate, I must say.
Look how still I'm holding myself. So.
That's great. Well, yeah, this has definitely been really helpful for me. I think it's always important to bring people on with different backgrounds, just because you never know where you're going to end up or who you'll interact with. And just having all of this knowledge in our back pockets will definitely help. Yeah,
you all have, time. Time is valuable. Can't get it back. And, you all have a choice to spend your time the way you want. I appreciate you spending it here with me. Hopefully, the feedback that I've shared has been helpful, or, if not helpful immediately, maybe it just pause for thought. And if you have additional questions, I would invite all of you. I think they all have my contact information today. I would think, or ping me on LinkedIn or email me directly. I'm happy to help.
Okay, great. Yeah, I will tag your LinkedIn when I send the email out, and I will also give the recording to anybody who requests it or anybody who wasn't able to make it.
I wanted to give a personal goodbye, see my face. Sorry about the darkness. It is so dark here right now. It's all like...
That's okay. The screen has lit up your face. We can still see you.
6 o'clock in the evening, and I see this light. I feel like I'm a head floating in the dark. But anyway, thanks to everyone. Be safe out there, and help out where you can with educating people about these vaccines. It's very important.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone,
Lindsay.
for coming.
Thank you, Renee.
Take care.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.